The first bullet found Sergeant Martinez's throat at 6:47 hours, and in that moment, I watched my world collapse into blood and betrayal. My name is Staff Sergeant Elena Shadow Hayes, 28th Medical Detachment, 75th Ranger Regiment. This is the story of how 8 days in hell taught me that survival isn't about becoming a monster. It's about remembering why you're human. The ambush erupted with surgical precision in the narrow valley we'd nicknamed Devil's Throat. Taliban fighters had spent weeks studying our patrol routes, learning our habits, waiting for the perfect killing ground. What should have been a routine reconnaissance became a slaughter orchestrated by minds that understood American tactics better than we'd ever imagined. Contact front, multiple shooters. An al-Capitauer. Rodriguez screamed as muzzle flashes erupted from concealed positions carved into the rocky ridgeline. The fear in his voice, a man I'd never heard show weakness in 3 deployments, sent ice through my veins. The morning air exploded with the crack of AK-47s and the deeper boom of RPGs. I could smell the cordite, taste the dust kicked up by bullets striking stone inches from my head. This wasn't random harassment fire. This was a coordinated kill box designed to eliminate our entire patrol. I sprinted toward Martinez medical training, overriding self-preservation. He was propped against a boulder, his eyes wide with shock blood, fountaining from his severed carotid artery in rhythmic spurts that matched his fading heartbeat. My hands moved automatically, applying pressure, while my mind screamed the horrible truth. I was watching my friend die, and there wasn't enough medical skill in the world to save him. Elena. Martinez whispered, using my first name for the first time in 2 years. His hand gripped mine with fading strength, blood making our fingers slippery. Tell my Maria. Tell her I was thinking about the wedding, about dancing with her. His voice trailed off as his pulse weakened beneath my desperate pressure. I'd seen death before, treated dozens of combat casualties, but watching the light fade from Martinez's eyes felt like losing a brother. The rage that followed was pure and consuming. These bastards had murdered a good man who just wanted to dance with his fiancée. That's when the second IED detonated. The blast hurled me down a steep ravine, my ears ringing vision, blurred by dust and debris. Through the settling chaos, I heard Hassan's fighters emerging from concealment, their voices mixing triumph with tactical precision. They'd planned this separation, isolating the medic for capture, while ensuring the other Americans couldn't mount an effective rescue. Rodriguez Johnson. I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the echo of gunfire above. My teammates were up there, possibly wounded, definitely outnumbered, and I was helpless to reach them. As rough hands bound my wrists with zip ties, raw fury burned through the shock. These bastards had murdered Martinez, wounded my teammates, and now they thought they'd won some kind of prize. They had no idea they'd just caged something far more dangerous than a broken prisoner. The last thing I saw before they blindfolded me was smoke rising from our position where Rodriguez and Johnson were hopefully still alive, still fighting. I made a silent promise to Martinez's memory. I would survive this. I would escape. And I would make these sons of bitches pay for what they'd done. Commander Rashid Hassan wasn't the stereotypical terrorist I'd expected. At 45, he carried himself with the bearing of a professional soldier, speaking flawless English with only the slightest accent. His compound was militarily precise, fortified positions, disciplined guards, communication protocols that rivaled our own forward operating bases. The blindfold came off in a concrete room lit by a single bare bulb. Hassan sat across from me, studying my face like a chess player evaluating his opponent's strategy. Behind him, detailed maps of the region covered the walls marked with American patrol routes, base locations, and what looked like months of intelligence gathering. Staff Sergeant Elena Hayes. he said, reading from my captured dog tags. Combat Medic, 75th Rangers. Granddaughter of Robert Ghost, Hayes Medal of Honor, recipient from Vietnam. Interesting family history. The casual mention of my grandfather's service record sent chills down my spine. Hassan had done his homework probably more thoroughly than I'd realized. You Americans believe your technology makes you superior. Hassan continued, settling back in his chair. But I spent 5 years studying at your war college in Kansas before the September 11th attacks changed everything. I know how Rangers think, how they fight, how they break under psychological pressure. This wasn't some cave-dwelling fanatic. This was an educated enemy who understood American military doctrine because he'd been trained in it. The implications were terrifying. Over the next 3 days, Hassan conducted psychological warfare with surgical precision. He described Martinez's death in clinical detail, speculated about Rodriguez's internal injuries, questioned whether Johnson would survive long enough for rescue. Each session was designed to strip away my military bearing and reduce me to a compliant prisoner begging for mercy. Your Sergeant Martinez took 11 minutes to die, Hassan said during our second session, watching my face for reactions. He called for his mother toward the end. Your Rodriguez has a collapsed lung. Without proper medical attention, he'll drown in his own blood within days. I forced myself to show fear, to let tears flow, while secretly memorizing every detail of Hassan's interrogation methods. He was following a textbook approach: isolate the prisoner, exploit emotional vulnerabilities, create despair about rescue prospects. But Hassan made one critical error: he talked too much. During his monologues about American weakness and the futility of resistance, I memorized guard rotations, communication schedules, even the personal details he let slip about his own operations. When he described his masterpiece Operation Desert Storm, I filed away every tactical detail while maintaining the facade of a broken soldier. Your government will pay handsomely for your return, Hassan said during our third session, his voice almost conversational. Female Rangers are rare prizes. Or perhaps Al Jazeera would prefer footage of America's elite warrior begging for mercy on international television. Why, I whispered, playing the role perfectly. Why kill innocent people who never hurt you? Hassan's expression hardened. And for the first time, I saw past the professional facade to something raw. My son was 8 years old when your drone struck his school in Kandahar. 63 children died that day because your intelligence was wrong, a wedding party misidentified as a terrorist meeting. He pulled out a photograph, a young boy with Hassan's eyes smiling beside a bicycle. Omar wanted to be a doctor. He collected pictures of American hospitals, dreamed of studying medicine in your country. Your Hellfire missile turned him into fragments too small for burial. For the first time, I saw past the terrorist facade to something more complex, a father driven by grief into darkness. It didn't excuse his actions, but it explained them. And understanding your enemy is the first step toward defeating them. I didn't choose this war, Sergeant Hayes. Hassan continued, carefully replacing the photograph. Your country brought it to my family. Now I bring it to yours. The pain in his voice was genuine, and I found myself feeling something unexpected: sympathy for a man whose love for his son had twisted into hatred for mine. But sympathy wouldn't save American lives, and it wouldn't bring Martinez back to his Maria. On the fourth night, everything changed when I heard crying from the cell next to mine. The sound was soft, muffled by concrete walls, but unmistakably human suffering. During the day's interrogation, Hassan had mentioned other prisoners' examples he kept to ensure local cooperation. But hearing actual evidence of innocent people suffering in this hellhole made my anger burn hotter. Hello? I whispered through a crack in the concrete wall. "Is someone there?" "American," came a young voice in broken English, barely audible through the stone. I am Khalil." Over whispered conversations conducted during guard shift changes, I learned that Khalil was barely 16, son of a village elder, who'd refused to support Hassan's operations. The boy had been held for 3 weeks as leverage against his father's cooperation, a prisoner like me, but innocent of any military involvement. "My father sent message to Americans," Khalil explained quietly during one midnight conversation. "He tried to help your soldiers find safe paths through mountains. Hassan, he killed my older brother Muhammad for punishment. Now he used me to make father obey." The kid's English was limited but improving through our conversations. More importantly, he'd spent 3 weeks observing the compound's routines, memorizing guard schedules, even learning which fighters were homesick teenagers and which were hardened killers. "Hassan, he very smart," Khalil warned. "He show you false information, make you think you know his plans. But real operation he keeps secret from everyone except his closest men." This confirmed my growing suspicion that Operation Desert Storm was misdirection. Hassan was too intelligent to reveal his actual plans to a prisoner, no matter how broken she appeared. "Khalil," I whispered, "how would you like to go home to your father?" "Do you have plan?" Hope crept into the boy's voice for the first time. "I'm working on it, but I'll need help from someone who knows this place better than I do." Together, we began planning something far more realistic than my original fantasy of single-handedly destroying an entire compound. We would create confusion, gather real intelligence about Hassan's plans, and escape to warn American forces about his true target, whatever that might be. Because over the past 3 days, I'd realized something crucial. Hassan was too professional to reveal his actual operation to a prisoner. The medical convoy story felt like misdirection, designed to send American forces racing to defend the wrong target, while his real objective remained unprotected. The memory of my grandmother's voice echoed in my mind. "Elena, when hunting deer, watch. Not where they graze, but where they drink. The feeding grounds are obvious, the water source reveals true patterns." Hassan had shown me where he wanted me to think he was grazing. Now I needed to find his water source. My first elimination wasn't the clean professional kill I'd envisioned during training. Ahmad, the young guard who'd shown me occasional sympathy, entered my cell for his nightly intimidation session. The blood choke I applied was textbook perfect. But when his body went limp in my arms, my hands were shaking uncontrollably. "I'm sorry," I whispered to his unconscious form, checking his pulse to ensure he was alive. "You chose the wrong side, kid, but you don't deserve to die for it." Stripping his uniform felt like grave robbing. Ahmad was barely older than Khalil, probably pressed into service by circumstances beyond his control. His wallet contained a photograph of an elderly woman, his grandmother maybe, or his mother. Someone who loved him and expected him to come home. But sympathy wouldn't save Rodriguez, and Johnson wouldn't prevent Hassan's real attack, wouldn't bring Martinez back to dance at his wedding. I folded Ahmad's photograph carefully and placed it back in his pocket before dragging his unconscious body into the maintenance tunnels Khalil had described. The compound's underground infrastructure was more extensive than I'd imagined, a network of utility tunnel storage areas and forgotten chambers that Hassan's men rarely bothered to patrol. With Khalil's whispered guidance, I learned to navigate the maze of concrete and pipes that honeycombed the mountain installation. Second tunnel, turn left, then straight 50 meters. Khalil's voice drifted through the ventilation system we used to communicate. Communications room is above, but guard changes every 4 hours. Our partnership nearly ended in disaster when Farid, the communications operator, almost caught us accessing his radio equipment. I'd been copying down frequency settings and coded messages when footsteps approached unexpectedly. My training knife found his heart more from panic than precision, and his strangled cry brought running footsteps from other parts of the compound. Only Khalil's quick thinking, creating a distraction by triggering a false alarm in the vehicle compound, prevented our immediate discovery. But Farid's death marked the end of our careful surveillance phase. Hassan would know someone was operating inside his security perimeter. The intelligence we'd gathered was worse than I'd feared. Hassan's target wasn't the medical convoy I'd been shown, that was indeed misdirection. Intercepted radio traffic revealed coordination with cells in 3 provinces, timeline references to the American celebration, and most chilling of all, discussions about maximum symbolic impact. 4th of July. I breathed, studying the decoded messages by flashlight in our tunnel hideout. He's planning something for Independence Day. Khalil's face went pale in the dim light. Many American diplomats come to Kabul for celebration at embassy. Big party, many important people. The embassy celebration would be a perfect target. Hundreds of American diplomatic personnel, military officers, and local Afghan officials gathered in one place to celebrate American independence. Hassan wouldn't just be killing Americans. He'd be eliminating the entire diplomatic effort in Afghanistan with one coordinated strike. We have to warn them, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew the terrible reality. The embassy celebration was tomorrow night. Even if we escaped immediately, there might not be enough time to coordinate a response. Hassan discovered Ahmad's body on the 6th morning, and the compound erupted into total lockdown. Instead of the gradual intelligence-gathering operation I'd planned, we were forced into desperate improvisation that nearly got us both killed. Search every tunnel, every storage room, every possible hiding place. Hassan's voice echoed through the compound's address system. Someone is moving through my installation like a ghost, and I want them found before sunset. The manhunt forced us deeper underground into flooded tunnels that reeked of sewage and stagnant water. My carefully hoarded medical supplies, intended for creating diversionary devices, were now soaked and probably useless. The 2 small incendiary charges I'd managed to construct seemed pathetically inadequate against Hassan's 40-man garrison and their heavy weapons. We cannot fight them all, Khalil whispered as boots thundered overhead, methodically searching each level of the compound. Too many guns, too many men with nothing to lose. He was right. My grandiose fantasies of becoming a one-woman army crumbled against tactical reality. But my grandfather's voice echoed from childhood training sessions. Elena, victory doesn't require destroying your enemy. Sometimes it just requires denying them victory long enough for help to arrive. That night, while Hassan's men continued their search of the upper levels, we implemented a different strategy. Instead of trying to eliminate enemies, we would cripple their operational capability and create enough chaos to facilitate an escape with the intelligence needed to prevent the embassy massacre. The first incendiary device destroyed Hassan's primary radio equipment, cutting his connection to external operatives and disrupting coordination with cells in other provinces. The explosion also triggered a fire that spread to ammunition storage, creating secondary detonations that sent Hassan's men scrambling for fire suppression equipment. In the confusion, we used my remaining smoke device to obscure our movement through the vehicle compound, where Khalil's mechanical knowledge proved invaluable. He showed me how to sabotage truck engines by removing distributor caps and draining brake fluid, simple but effective methods that would prevent rapid pursuit once we escaped the compound. But when Hassan's men cornered us in the tunnel system near dawn, I realized we weren't going to make a clean getaway. Flashlight beams swept the darkness as voices grew closer, and our hiding place in the flooded drainage tunnel was becoming untenable. Khalil, there's an emergency exit near the north wall, I said, pressing my last smoke grenade into his trembling hands. You know this compound better than I do. Can you reach the village road without being detected? What about you? The boy asked, fear making his voice crack. I'm going to buy you time to get away. Your father needs to contact the Americans about the embassy attack. You're the only one who can deliver that intelligence. Khalil's face showed the internal struggle between self-preservation and loyalty. You saved my life. I cannot abandon you now. You're not abandoning me, I said firmly. You're completing the mission. That's what soldiers do. We finish the job no matter the cost. The 16-year-old boy nodded with a maturity that broke my heart. War had stolen his childhood, but it hadn't broken his courage. My capture was inevitable, but it wasn't the end I'd feared. When Hassan's men dragged me from the tunnels at dawn, I was exhausted, filthy, and running on nothing but stubborn determination. But I was also exactly where I needed to be for the final phase of my plan. The ghost reveals herself, Hassan said, studying me with professional interest as his men forced me to my knees in his command center. I underestimated you, Sergeant Hayes. You move well for someone trained in American schools. My grandfather learned from the best teachers. I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. The Viet Cong taught him that small forces can defeat large ones through superior intelligence and tactical patience. Hassan's smile was genuinely appreciative. Your grandfather was a worthy enemy during my country's struggle against Soviet occupation. He cost the Russians many good men with his training programs. But this is not Vietnam, and you are not fighting demoralized conscripts. No, I agreed. I'm fighting someone who perverts legitimate grief into mass murder of innocents. For the first time, Hassan's composure cracked slightly. You know nothing about legitimate grief, American. You rain fire from the sky and call it precision. You kill children and call it collateral damage. You're right, I said quietly, and I meant it. War makes monsters of us all. But targeting diplomats won't bring your son back. It will just create more orphans like Khalil. Hassan's reaction, a barely perceptible flinch at Khalil's name, told me everything I needed to know. The boy had escaped, and Hassan knew it. Khalil was probably already reaching his father's village, carrying intelligence about the embassy attack that could save hundreds of lives. You cost me weeks of planning and several good men, Hassan said, pulling his sidearm with deliberate slowness. But you also confirmed something important. Even American Rangers can be broken with sufficient psychological pressure. I watched him thumb off the safety calculating angles and distances. The knife I'd taken from Ahmad was still taped to my ankle. If Hassan came close enough for execution, I might have one chance. Maybe, I replied. But we don't break easily. And sometimes breaking us just makes us more dangerous. Hassan stepped forward close enough for me to smell his aftershave, close enough for what I needed to do. Any last words for your country, Sergeant Hayes? Yeah, I said, palming the concealed blade. Next time, don't monologue. The knife found the gap between his ribs before he could react, puncturing his heart with the surgical precision my medical training provided. Hassan's expression showed more surprise than pain as he collapsed his unfired weapon, clattering across the concrete floor. His last words were in Pashto, probably calling for his son. Even in death, he remained a father first, terrorist second. The compound descended into chaos without Hassan's leadership. His lieutenants had been kept ignorant of operational details, as security measures leaving them unable to coordinate either the embassy attack or effective resistance against American forces converging on their position. I spent 18 hours hiding in the command bunker, monitoring radio traffic and documenting intelligence from Hassan's files. The embassy attack had been scheduled for 1900 hours sunset during the Independence Day celebration. Without Hassan's coordination and the sabotaged vehicles, his scattered cells couldn't mount an effective assault. The rescue helicopter arrived at dawn, guided by Khalil's intelligence and GPS coordinates I transmitted on Hassan's emergency frequency. When Marine raiders found me sitting among classified documents and Hassan's body, I was holding a complete map of terrorist cells across 3 provinces. Sergeant Hayes. Captain Morrison called out, his weapon lowered but ready. "Are you injured?" "Physically, no, sir," I replied, standing slowly on legs that barely supported my weight. "But we need to implement immediate security protocols for the embassy celebration. Hassan's network is disrupted but not eliminated." The debriefing lasted 8 hours. Intelligence officers grilled me about every detail, every piece of information I'd gathered, every tactical decision Khalil and I had made. The hardest questions concerned Hassan himself. They wanted to understand how a war college graduate had become a terrorist leader. He wasn't evil, I explained to Colonel Richards, the intelligence chief. He was a father destroyed by grief who channeled his pain into revenge. That doesn't excuse his actions, but it explains them. And understanding our enemies makes us better at defeating them. 2 days later, I was finally allowed to visit my teammates in the military hospital at Bagram. Rodriguez was conscious, but weak, his chest wrapped in bandages from surgery to repair his punctured lung and internal bleeding. Johnson sat beside his bed, his leg elevated in traction, but his spirits remarkably high. "Ghost," Rodriguez said, using my call sign with a tired smile. "Heard you raise some hell while we were laid up playing invalid." "Just returning the favor," I replied, fighting back tears that had been building for a week. "Martinez." "Memorial service is scheduled for next week at Dover," Johnson said quietly. "His Maria wants to meet you. Says Martinez always talked about his crazy medic who'd rather fight than retreat." The grief hit me, then delayed shock, finally overwhelming military discipline. My teammates held me while I cried for Martinez, for Hassan's dead son Omar, for Khalil's murdered brother Muhammad, for all the casualties of a war that seemed to create more enemies than it eliminated. He saved my life. I sobbed into Rodriguez's shoulder. Martinez took that bullet meant for me. I should have been faster, should have seen the sniper, should have... "Stop," Rodriguez said firmly. "Martinez knew the risks. We all do. You honor his memory by living, not by drowning in guilt over battlefield chaos no one could control." Later that evening, alone in my hospital room, I video-called Martinez's fiancée, Maria. She was exactly as he described: dark hair, gentle eyes, a smile that lit up her entire face, even through grief. "Elena," she said, and hearing my name in her accent brought fresh tears. "Miguel, he told me you were like sister to him. He said you would bring him home one way or another." "I'm so sorry, Maria. I tried everything." "You did bring him home," she interrupted gently. "His body, yes, but also his honor. He died protecting his family, you, Rodriguez Johnson. That is how he wanted to go, if he had to go." She showed me wedding photos they'd taken just before deployment. Martinez in his dress uniform, Maria in white lace, both of them laughing at some private joke. They'd been planning a honeymoon in Hawaii, a small house near her family children who would never exist now. The army they give me flag, Maria continued. But you give me something more important. You give me truth about his last moments. He died thinking of our wedding, our future. That brings me peace. After the call ended, I sat in darkness, thinking about the cost of survival. I'd prevented a massacre, disrupted a terrorist network, saved diplomatic lives that would never know how close they'd come to death. But the price was measured in grief, mine, Maria's, Hassan's, Khalil's. War wasn't about good versus evil, despite what politicians claimed. It was about people trying to protect what they loved, even when love twisted into hatred, even when protection required destruction. 6 months later, I was promoted to Sergeant First Class and awarded the Silver Star for actions above and beyond the call of duty. The citation mentioned intelligence gathering, tactical innovation, and preventing civilian casualties, but it couldn't capture the full psychological cost of those 8 days in hell. The nightmares came sporadically. Martinez calling my name, Hassan's son Omar, playing with his bicycle, Khalil crying in the darkness of his cell. Sometimes I woke up thinking I was still in those tunnels, still planning desperate escapes that might save lives I couldn't protect. The military psychologist diagnosed it as acute stress reaction, treatable with therapy and time. What she couldn't treat was the weight of knowledge, understanding that every enemy had been someone's child, that every victory came with invisible scars, that survival was sometimes the heaviest burden of all. But there were victories to balance the nightmares. The humanitarian convoy reached the refugee camps, safely delivering medicine and supplies to families who needed both. Doctors Without Borders sent me a letter describing children whose lives were saved by treatments that convoy provided, lives that might have been lost if Hassan's misdirection had succeeded. Khalil wrote to me from his father's village, where he was studying with American tutors provided by the State Department. His English had improved dramatically, and his letters described dreams of becoming a doctor, honoring both his murdered brother and the medical workers we'd protected. He signed every letter, "Your brother in hope," which never failed to make me cry. The embassy celebration proceeded as scheduled with enhanced security that detected 3 separate infiltration attempts by Hassan's surviving operatives. Diplomatic efforts in Afghanistan continued, supported by intelligence that disrupted 5 other terrorist cells across the region. The impact rippled outward in ways I'd never fully know. Today I train new Rangers in unconventional warfare and survival techniques at Fort Benning. I teach them that victory doesn't always look like total destruction of the enemy. Sometimes it looks like a scared teenager finding courage to warn others about danger. Sometimes it looks like choosing compassion over revenge, even when revenge seems justified. My grandfather's ghost whispers that war reveals who we really are beneath the uniforms and rhetoric. Hassan chose to become a monster in service of his grief, letting love for his son transform into hatred for mine. I chose to remain human in service of hope, remembering that our enemies were also someone's children. The difference between us wasn't nationality or ideology, it was what we did with our pain. He used his to justify murder. I used mine to protect life, even when protection came at terrible personal cost. Some battles are won with overwhelming firepower and technological superiority. Others are won by refusing to let darkness consume your humanity, no matter how deep the shadows grow or how tempting revenge becomes. In the mountains of Afghanistan, I learned that the greatest victory isn't destroying your enemies, it's ensuring they can't destroy what you're fighting to protect. My name is Staff Sergeant Elena Shadow Hayes, and I survived not by becoming the monster they expected, but by remembering why monsters must be stopped. Some shadows hide predators who hunt the innocent. Others hide protectors who stand between light and darkness, no matter the cost. The war continues in Afghanistan and in the hearts of everyone it touches. But so does hope, carried forward by people like Khalil, who choose healing over hatred, by families like Maria's, who find peace in truth rather than revenge by soldiers who remember that our humanity is the most important thing we can bring home from war. Sometimes that's victory enough. Sometimes it has to be. The memorial wall at Fort Benning bears Martinez's name now, along with thousands of others who gave everything for causes they believed in. I visit it sometimes when the nightmares get too heavy, and I tell him about Maria's new husband, about the children who will carry his memory forward, about the lives saved by intelligence gathered in those dark tunnels. "We finished the mission, Miguel," I whisper to his carved name. "You would be proud of how it ended." And somewhere in the mountain wind that whispers through the Georgia pines, I swear I can hear him laughing the same sound that echoed through our barracks, that filled Maria's wedding photos, that I'll carry with me until my own name joins his on that wall. Some ghosts haunt us, others guide us home.